Hi, everyone. Wherever you're joining us from, wherever you are in the world, I hope you and your loved ones are healthy and safe. My name is Kelsey Foran, and I'm the Associate Director for Climate Programs here at the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center. Thank you to all so much for joining us today for EnergySource Innovation Stream, where we aim to highlight new energy technologies with the potential to really reshape the global energy system through discussions with companies and individuals working diligently to bring those innovations to market at scale. So today we're delighted to be joined by Dr. Suzanne Singer, co-founder of Native Renewables, to discuss the latest advancements in providing off-grid photovoltaic systems to rural communities in the Navajo Nation. Before we get started, a few quick housekeeping details. You can follow us on Twitter at AC Global Energy, use the hashtag Innovation Stream to talk about today's discussion. And then throughout the presentation, throughout the discussion, please submit your questions to the Q&A box if you are joining us directly via Zoom, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. So please let me welcome Dr. Suzanne Singer to the Atlantic Council. Dr. Singer, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you back, and the floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you. Bene, good morning, everybody. Thanks for inviting me to speak about my work. I am the Executive Director of Native Renewables. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation. I grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona, and that is where our offices are based out of. So I, started Native Renewables in 2016, and before that spent time at national laboratories, and I got my PhD in mechanical engineering. But this has been a wonderful adventure and something I'm truly passionate about. So I appreciate you giving me the time to share it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my slides and see how this goes. Okay, can you see it?
Yeah, it looks like we might be on we might need to switch to presentation mode.
Gotcha. Well, as I'm figuring that out, just a little bit more background about Native Renewables. So while I was based in Oakland, California, had a chance encounter with the other co-founder, Wahela Johns, who is also based in the Oakland area. And we met at a conference in Flagstaff, Arizona. And I think it's pretty funny. We were like, hey, I live in Oakland. Maybe we should get coffee sometime. And I was like, hey, I live in Oakland too. Absolutely. So it was actually really neat. We got to spend time thinking about what it is we were passionate about, what we wanted to share. And it really led to talking about our frustrations and why we wanted to support the new ventures and opportunities to be able to do this work. Is that better? Okay.
Perfect.
Great. So a little bit about background about Navajo, and we also are supporting the Hopi Nation as well. So there are two of over 560, 570 federally recognized tribes now, and there's many more state recognized tribes as well. The Navajo Nation is largely within Arizona, New Mexico, and a little bit of Utah as well. It's a huge location, so 27,000 square miles. So you can imagine trying to solve issues in such a large region has its challenges. But within and nearby Navajo is also the Hopi Nation, who also has some of the similar issues that need to be addressed. So within Navajo alone, estimates are about 15,000 homes do not have access to grid-tied electricity. Families can spend half of their income on energy fuels, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So, no electricity often means no refrigeration, no food storage options for yourself. And if you have limited grocery stores or limited access to food, you're also traveling long distances very often to procure food. So some of those challenges led us to want to be able to solve energy access challenges. Some of the things we really wanted to commit to were being able to lead our own initiatives, using local Indigenous workforce and being able to train them. We wanted solutions that could power critical needs like refrigerations or lights or charging for cell phone devices or for schools, laptops, the tablets, those kind of things. So you see the picture here on the left is, I'll say my typical going to my grandma's house experience where we had a propane lantern. There was only so much fuel we could use in the evening time. In the back, you see a stove. So it's a wood burning stove. So we'd use that to warm up water to wash dishes. Sometimes cooking, sometimes we bring propane for a propane stove. So I won't get into the big spiel of trying to haul water and cutting firewood, but there's a lot of extra steps that have to happen before you can actually cook or clean or do things that I have come accustomed to being readily available. The other thing we wanted was to make things affordable. There's a lot of low income families that live in the community. There's challenges with jobs, and shutdowns of different power plants locally have reduced the number of job opportunities that are available as well. We want things to be reliable. We want them to last for a long time. We want to make sure we're not going out frequently to having to support these kind of fixes. And then lastly, we wanted to build community knowledge around off-grid energy specifically, because it's not like utility scale where you can use as much as you can and then you pay at the end. You only have a limited amount of resources to use, and you have to be very diligent about what you can use, how often you use it, to make sure your system runs the entire day and lasts for years. And I forgot to show this picture. So this is a cute graphic by a native company, Terraform, and they did a rendering for us for what it could look like. And sheep is a big hot commodity in the community, so I thought that was really cute. So Native Renewables, our mission is to, one, empower Native families to be energy independent, to be able to own their own power. We wanted to build solar, and within our own work, also support that cultural knowledge around stories around the sun. And of course, lastly, I mentioned already, affordable access to clean energy is one of the things that we're passionate about. So Native Renewables, we're an Indigenous-led team. We started in 2016, but we actually formed our own 501c3 in 2020. And since then, we've done a lot of things, which I'll talk about later. But we're a mix of engineers, electricians, scientists, installers, all age groups. And between us, and granted, we have someone who has over 30 years off-grid experience, but between all of us, we have decades of combined solar experience. We have currently 6 full-time staff and 5 part-time staff. A lot of the folks in this picture, they know different areas of the community. Some of them fluent in Navajo, speak Hopi. So I think that goes a long way to make sure we're successful in the work it is that we do. We have a veteran on the team, which is really exciting. And he did a webinar, I think last November, maybe. So that was pretty cool to see that. If you get a chance, Ian Masayesva was on one of the webinars earlier from Atlantic Council. So I'm going to go into a little bit of some of our programs. So the first one, we call it Hojon Homes. Hojon is sort of this Navajo word, but it's a concept of balance and harmony. And so what we would like is for the power we provide to add to that harmony and balance in the home for different families. This picture on the left here is a lovely family from the Hopi community. We did an install for them last year, and soon, I don't know when it's going to come out. There'll be a documentary. They'll be in it, and I'll be excited whenever that gets released. But they were so kind to allow us to come in and bring a film crew and be a little bit intrusive in their home. So we really appreciate it. But they're so grateful, and I think that is awesome. The second program we have is called Triage. So one of the things we know is prevalent in our community is a lot of systems that we didn't install are no longer working. And so I guess one challenge we have is it sort of brings this mentality of, solar energy doesn't work because my system doesn't work anymore. So we're trying to combat that by bringing education and helping find solutions to be able to get their system running again. So in this picture is one of our staff. He's basically troubleshooting an inverter in this system. So some of the things we'll do is we will replace charge controllers, batteries. We haven't replaced any inverters at this point, but we are looking at other ways to do that. So this year we've done several fixes for different families. And I will say these are challenging because they're kind of like, they're all different. So it's not like we can implement one solution fits all, but it is a really great learning experience. But this is the other thing I didn't mention was some of the stories we hear. Some families have really great education. They know exactly how off-grid, how to manage their system. We have other families who had people come in, install, and didn't tell them, hey, you can't buy a washer dryer. Your 1 kilowatt system is not going to power your washer, your dryer, and your water heater. So these are kind of the basic things that I think need to be addressed or shared in the community. So we're trying to help educate about those things so families don't go out and spend a lot of their money on things they'll never be able to use in their home unless they upgrade. Our third program, workforce, we are working on training local Indigenous installers and technicians. So we had our first workforce training in 2018, end of 2018, and end of 2019. And that was kind of our first effort to do a work session in the community. We partnered with one of the local community leaders and centers. They allowed us to use their space, which was amazing. We invited 10 people to participate. It was about 7 weeks long. Everyone did about 2 or 3 days per week. But what was amazing was they were willing to drive hundreds of miles to participate in this. And they all attended, I think, maybe except for one day, I think everyone attended every single day, which is pretty phenomenal. But I think investing in our people was really important. So trying to house it locally, work with local partners. We had another nonprofit partner, and also making sure people get mileage paid for, they have support. We paid for their OSHA 10 safety training. So really trying to bring in other resources for them to make it worth their while. So I think that was pretty fun. And then 2020, we had plans to do even more, and COVID hit, completely destroyed our plans. So we worked on doing virtual training. And so we're kind of in our third effort, or our third virtual class that we're offering at this point. And those who successfully go through those programs, we invite them to do in-person training, of course, on a very limited basis. So here is a picture of one of those. That's Deb Tiwa. She was the American Indian Science and Engineering Society Indigenous Excellence Award winner for professionals for the professional award category. And down next to her is actually one of our staff members, part-time staff members that we brought on board. And then the last piece is outreach. So that's what we're trying to really do, that education part, creating some tools or resources to build that knowledge. So just kind of recap some of our accomplishments for 2021, which is a big year. And despite, working in a pandemic, I feel like we did a lot. So we started off for the year with, I think, 5 staff, then we went down to 4 staff, and now we're at 12 staff. So that's been pretty exciting. We provided over 150 hours of workforce training, both to our team to build their capacity, but also to people who are willing or interested in starting their solar career. We've hosted a few virtual hands-on and OSHA trainings. This year, we installed 18 off-grid solar units, about 2.4 kilowatts in size. Our goal is always going to be to install 100 a year. So until we reach that, that'll be a wonderful day. But the size of the system, the goal is to help power a small full-size refrigerator, provide lights, and then charging for devices. Because of COVID, we were able to donate solar kits. So they either had solar flashlights or solar lighting or solar cell phone charging to families across Navajo and other tribal nations as well. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we made 14 triage visits and were able to refurbish 6 of those systems. But I'll leave it, start to switch over gears to questions. So thank you. Appreciate it. Here's my contact information and some of our social media tags. And then here's us at that, within that Hopi community, that install that we did. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Singer. That was a great presentation, really interesting work. I want to remind, we already see some questions coming into the Q&A, but I want to remind participants, you can keep submitting and we'll have some time to get through a few of your questions. I think I'm going to selfishly start off with one of mine. So why solar power? We often hear of the need to diversify energy sources. So what's the solar specific opportunity as you see it in the Navajo Nation? And what role does battery storage play in ensuring reliability and continued access?
Yep. So I think solar is a really great option for the Navajo Nation, or basically the whole southwestern United States. If you look at any solar resource potential map, NREL is very famous for them. You'll see a big hotspot right over kind of Arizona, New Mexico area. So that's one reason, is because the potential is so good in the country. I think the other reason, well, I'll say reasons we don't do other things, is trying to think about access to things for maintenance. We haven't gotten into wind energy at all. We've been asked a few times, but I think at some point there's older wind systems that are out there. We get asked a lot if they're not working, how do you take them down? And we're like, we don't really have heavy equipment for that at this point. Maybe one day. So I feel like solar is the easiest, quote unquote, to start with for our team for the time being. Because we work in an off-grid environment, having battery storage is really important, especially for winter days or cloudy days. So we do add battery storage to all of our installs, and we are building or designing for 3 days of autonomy, or if they use it as directed, it should work for 3 days without any access to sunlight. Of course, if you're using it more than you should be, it's going to be less than that. But that was the ultimate goal and reason. Yeah, I can get into more discussion about batteries. We typically use sealed lead acid. So there's a whole separate recycling discussion we're thinking about, end of life discussion. We've just started considering. So those are all small pieces to the whole pie of why it is we do what we do.
Great. And we actually had a question in the Q&A about how you think of equipment end of life. What is that conversation at Native Renewables, and how are you thinking through this?
Yeah, I think I'll start with the battery piece. So for now, we know lead type batteries, they get recycled. People pay to get them recycled, or they were pay you the core charges to be able to get that back. So I would say that's a relatively easier thing to do. And one we're working on right now. The other big reason I forgot to mention for lead acid batteries is thinking about what environments they might be put in. So it could be a huge temperature swing as they're outdoors, and some of their batteries have a narrower temperature operation range. So that's another reason why we're kind of working in, I don't know if it's older technology, but it's a little bit more established technology. Having said that, we have tried a few lithium batteries in some of our triages. So we're sort of piloting them, testing them out. We're going to use a few lithium batteries in new installs this year, just to see how design changes happen. It's obviously lighter and less of them, which is great for transporting them, because we're using batteries for weight sometimes for wind challenges. That's another thing we have to consider. But most lithium manufacturers, when I ask them, what is your recycling protocol? A lot of them are at the point where they'll say, by the time you don't need them anymore, we should have a recycling program. I feel like that's a pretty common answer. So, it's like, yeah, I'm glad you're working on it, but it's not quite there yet. So that's part of it. The third reason, I think in terms of longevity, lithium makes a lot more sense for number of cycles you can do. But for price, sometimes price just to get the lowest price possible, we'll kind of just work with the lower price lithium. We don't go all the way down to flooded batteries, because I know some families are not we'll have elders and not really conducive to going out and checking water levels all the time. So that's the battery, and kind of long-winded answer to the battery piece. The PV, solar PV piece, the module, that's something we're just now starting to get into. I think the main one, I'll say the core criteria for us when procuring modules is price, honestly, price and wattage. So that's the initial one. And I think as we get more comfortable with different manufacturers, and then we can start to look at, be more diligent about where does it come from. I'm sure there's really great resources. I just haven't read any at this point, but about where they're mined at, the components are mined, where they're manufactured. So those are all things that we do want to get to the point of thinking about those. We just haven't had the capacity at this point. But I think one thing that is challenging for us is module recycling. So give you an example, one of our triages, we had the wind, there was modules on a frame, the wind knocked it down. There was like one metal pole here and it completely smashed through the module. And so we were able to decommission it, take it down. And we're not like utility scale, so it's not like we have a ton of ones that we're trying to, move. We have one off, and so the question is, how much do we pay to mail it? Where do we send it? We were considering driving to Yuma to recycle it, which is about at least 4 hours, maybe 5 to 6 hours away from here. So I think we're still doing our own research on that, thinking about what our options are that are ideally affordable, but kind of these one-offs that we have. Is there other ways we can, work with other people to ship them all together? So that one's a little bit harder, not quite figured out yet. In terms of some of the other pieces that are out there, frames and those sorts of things, we haven't got to the point where we're discussing that stuff. But I think providing sort of a little bit more education to the community. We get a lot of questions on, well, what if it starts leaking metals, those kind of things. And I think that's a real fear within when we do installs. So we have to start providing more awareness about those kind of things in the future as well.
Great. And you touched a little bit about unemployment rates and how a solar installation can provide gainful employment. Traditionally, these generating stations have provide employment opportunities, but not necessarily sustained prosperity. So how can solar bring that local prosperity and keep a gainfully employed workforce?
Yeah, this is actually something we're actively in discussions with other groups about. I think it's a really big discussion. One of our challenges, so some of the mine jobs that we had were easily 6 figures on the low end, really great benefits, and hundreds, I'm trying to think how many, I think 300 to 500 jobs roughly in that ballpark for community members. And so I think one piece we're working through is what are some, I'll say, what priorities do local communities have in going solar? Like what careers would make the most sense to help build up the economic capacity, economic development, and solar project development? The other conversation we're having is, it's great to build up, I'll say higher up in the management chain, people that can help manage this. So they have those career options as well. I have heard, and this is so challenging, but in the terms of the utility install scale, if you have like a one-off project and you're hiring local labor, I think that's great. You're hiring local labor. Some of them actually want more than that, but then just to put on modules, and sometimes it requires electricians or people who are actually in those trades or have been in those trades for a lot longer. So I think it's kind of going to be a long game for some of those more, well-paid career positions. And so I think it's kind of neat, exciting, kind of challenging to be able to move this needle. But I think as more, at least within the Hopi Nation, we're talking with them as they're trying to build up their own capacity. There will be those opportunities because they'll be able to lead it and guide it and implement some of those hiring guidelines and criteria. So I don't have the perfect answer. But it's definitely something you're thinking about a lot of different things at the same time.
Yeah, I'm only throwing you the easy questions. Yeah. If only we had all the answers. So we had a question in the Q&A about the typical capacity of the systems that you install, and if there's a kind of a tendency to stick to one, if there's a rule of thumb.
Yeah, the reason we have roughly a 2.4 is that we wanted kind of quote unquote minimal for refrigeration, lights, charging. In a wonderful world, we would love to go bigger, but we always have to play that cost versus size versus what we can provide game. So it's tough. That's kind of the size we work with. I think this year we're hoping to start working on smaller PV with more efficient cooling options. And so we kind of want to pilot some of those and see how that works out. So that'll be a lot smaller. The systems that we've triaged before, they're kind of in the 800 watt, 1 kW size, 1 kilowatt size. And so for now, that is what we're working on. This past weekend, we helped another organization work on close to a 4 kilowatt ground mount system. So we're learning, we're broadening our horizons, but that's kind of the rough range that we're in right now.
I think we might have time for two more if I can squeeze them in here. One from the Q&A. So what kind of partnership models do you work with Native Renewables? Are you partnered with NGOs? Do you partner at all with DOE? What are the partnerships that are most valuable to you in your operations?
Yep. So we have some with NGOs. There's another nonprofit that we work with. They do a lot more of the policy stuff. Well, actually, there's a few new nonprofits that we work with, like Twanjone, Ane, Dine Care. They do a lot of the policy stuff. So they kind of help when we have questions. We usually go to them for those kind of things. Like TNA, before they help contribute to our workforce training, they hired someone to cook meals for us during the training, which was phenomenal, and everyone loved it. I loved it. It was delicious. So that's another perk of having partners in that sense. We do have education training partners. We work with like Remote Energy, they've been amazing. So with them and our team, we'll co-teach on different solar classes. And I think it's a really good question. Good partnerships, I think, are like we're equally invested in each other's missions, which is really important. It doesn't feel one-sided. It feels very much like give and take, which is amazing. We like to talk each other up. I think the other thing is like trust. We took time to get to know each other and build that trust that, we're actually in it for the right things. And, sometimes it like all this ARPA money kind of terrifies me, because I know people Google Native American, they look us up and they're like, hey, do you want to work together? And I'm like, I know nothing about you. Do you know anything about me, what we do? Because we get a lot of requests that are completely outside our scope of work. So it's that whole, it just takes time to build that and get to know each other.
I have one last quick question. I know we're at 11:30 here, but just as a closing, so around 1/3 of homes in the US face energy poverty or inadequate energy access. What lessons can we take from your experience with Native Renewables to improve clean energy access more broadly?
Yeah, I think one, I guess, thinking about what other things that it impacts. So, a lot of community members are artists or seem like they create products and they have their own small businesses. So like they'll need a sewing machine. And that's, if you don't have like a foot pump kind, or you don't have kind of the older kind, then that becomes really challenging to run your business, or you have to do it in only certain hours of the day, or you're using a lot of fuel. I think also understanding challenges. We've talked to families who literally go to town every day to get ice for their ice chests. And, they're not always like the great Yeti, or sorry, I shouldn't promote anybody, the really insulated kind of ice chest. They're like the old school, not as great as they are now, and also not as expensive kind of ice chest. So if you're driving 30 minutes to an hour and a half one way every day to pick your ice, it really takes a toll on like your time. You could be doing other things, your gas, your fuel, maybe you're getting other things too. And so that's a little bit different. But so there's all of these, I feel like other expenses that may not be seen or are happening in the background. So I feel like if having access to energy really helps productivity in areas that you need it. It's big for education. A lot of students didn't have internet access because they didn't have power in COVID. So remote learning was incredibly hard. So they had to drive to school. And sometimes those roads are like crazy dirt roads. We take 4-wheel drives everywhere we go. We just assume we're not having internet or cell phone service anywhere. So, trying to function with those challenges, it takes a lot of effort. So us understanding that first is really important. But I think if you're big on equity, like not having electricity is a really big topic. I think it's really unfair that a lot of us don't have electricity, and it's kind of, I think a lot of us take it for granted. But I think thinking about supporting efforts just for, I don't know, we've had technical support, people give us advice for different things. People help introduce us to vendors for things. There's lots of like other organizations that provide support that, live off of donations. So I think those are all pieces that are just larger that are happening out there that you should be aware of. But I think the other futuristic things I'm excited about is technology, how much that advances, how much that makes our lives easier. So I'm excited about that as well.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Dr. Singer. This was great. I think we could talk for another 2 hours, but this will have to do for now. So you can follow Native Renewables on Twitter at Power for Natives with a 4, Power for Natives. Also, this presentation is available on the Atlantic Council website, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. So please share it with your colleagues or anyone who might be interested in learning more. And I hope you all will join us for our next episode of EnergySource Innovation Stream on February 24th at 12 p.m. In the meantime, thank you so much, Dr. Singer. Stay healthy and well, all of you, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.